You're tuned in to RX Radio.
You got blood work. You got blood work done, right?
Yeah, very recently.
You're coming in on like the hot end of hot.
Yo, I feel like a super fucking a superhero right now. As I sent it to Mac, and he just straight up asked if I was on gear.
That's a compliment.
Oh, dude, I took it as a compliment. I've never been strong enough for people to question if I was on steroids or not. Like that's always been like kind of a goal of mine is for like people just to assume I was on drugs, but I haven't gotten that strong.
It's kind of weird that it came down to the ticker. It came down to the blood work.
Yeah,
the tail of the tape. This guy's
Yeah.
got the most amount of testosterone.
Which actually makes me question why I'm not stronger. I'm a little bit upset about this.
Yeah. Oh, man. I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah, it's like, I'm all right. I'm fucking up here.
But hey, well, I think maybe the glass half full version should be like, well, at least I'm not. Imagine if I didn't have all this testosterone.
Oh, I'd be
right. Right? You'd be bagging groceries or some shit. You'd be a gimp.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that'd be a sad life. So the glass is definitely half full right now.
Sometimes the syringe is half full. Sometimes we just fill it all the way up. Yeah. I honestly sometimes this is what we do. On full transparency here, we have no idea what to talk about sometimes because I don't like entering things into the public sphere of shit that's been said before. So a lot of times it's just insults because those are kind of new and fresh, and like the nauseating pitch at which hormones and look, everything matters. If you gerrymander the right context, something's going to matter to someone. But it's very odd to me that like these fucking perimenopausal middle-aged podcast hosts, and I'm using the word perimenopausal to describe men as this extra jab, like talking about hormones. And it's like, I think the most useful conversation around hormones is probably when we start to factor in its role in energy expenditure, because it's like there's two conversations that come. There's a conversation that comes to light, and one of the podcasts I thought we might record was the most common fitness topics and like bullet point answers to them, because one of them is like calories in, calories out.
Okay,
right? Because this is a conversation that's rarely contextualized, and I ascribe to the model of calories in, calories out, because I'm a human being who understands like loosely thermodynamics, but I also understand the depths of calories in, calories out, taking into consideration hormones' roles in energy expenditure and balance, right? So like when I think of hormones, like, dude, what's his, and I don't want to, I like his stuff and I need to go on record in saying that, but what's the supplement that everyone's fucking Muhammad Ali, what's the supplement that everyone's taking?
Yeah, that was a Rogan thing, huh? He's the one that started pumping that.
I think it was a Huberman thing.
Was it a Huberman? Okay.
I think Rogan's was ivermectin, and then Huberman's was
that the COVID shit?
Yeah, that thing. It was like legit, but then CNN tried to say it was like horse tranquilizer, dewormer, not tranquilizer,
which makes me more bought in on it. By the way.
Like, yeah, dude. If my steroids, and I've like low key, I've been around anabolic steroids for like a decade, longer than a decade. I've seen warehouses full of illegal drugs. I've seen trunks of cars, suitcases. I've seen raw powders ziplocked into freeze dried. I've been in every level of steroid operation, underground lab shit. I've watched guys take stuff that's been frozen and heat it up with a fucking hair dryer while another guy fucking pulls out of the syringe, and you can see like the crystalline structure of the chemicals. Like Netflix, call me. We'll do a Breaking Bad with steroids. It's fucking amazing. It's so good. And why were we talking about this?
I don't know, but I'm bought in. I'm so interested in wherever this goes.
Dude, it's fucking the underground steroid world is wild. But what we're talking about, Tonga Ali. Oh, this is what we're talking about. I've seen steroids come from vets. Like I've seen clenbuterol gel with horses on it. And I've seen some chick sit down and measure by the pump into her oatmeal. Like by the pump. Like, this is how I'm measuring my drugs, not by milligrams, or I guess that would be, I think, micrograms for clenbuterol. Like, literally just sit there, make her oatmeal, and with a giant fucking horse on the front of it, and like it was a fucking bottle of shampoo at Costco or some shit. So it's like, yeah, veterinary grade stuff works. And it's just, when we talk, and if we talk hormones, I think energy balance is probably like the way to go. Because the big, not the way to go, but like, some people are waking up every morning and fucking showing their neighbors their ball sack to get sun on their nuts. It's like, dog, that ain't it, homie. Like, that ain't the ticket, man. Like, you got to get put on a sex offenders list to get your vitamin D up. Like, you get solitary confinement for that shit. You're not going to see the light of day for 300 days a year. So it's like, when we look at like, okay, when does hormones matter? I think that's probably like the number one question I find putting back to people when they ask me about, information around weight training or weight loss or muscle gain. It's like, okay, at what level of your experience, like, what are the big rocks? When do these things matter? And it's like, I think the majority of people should be worried about hormones as so much they affect their energy balance. I think that's a really good portal of entry of like, okay, you can control your calorie intake and have a rough estimate of what your calorie output is. You can probably infer some high level things about your hormones' role in energy balance based off of those two things, right? Because I do agree, like, calories in, calories out is a more sophisticated thought process than the if it fits your macros crowd eating Pop-Tarts out of fanny packs while they're training, or like whatever the fuck dumb kids do, right? So it's like, if we look at it that way, and people, hey, based off of whatever total energy expenditure or basal metabolic rate calculator you find online, or James Mack's infinite wisdom with spreadsheets, you're not seeing the needle move in a way that makes sense. Now, the reason that is, it's not because you're in some starvation mode or something. There's just something wrong with storage hormone signaling, right? Whether that's insulin, whether that's testosterone, precursors to testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. Like, this is where I think is a really good portal into the conversation, because a lot of people, I think, go down the route of hormone optimization, and this doesn't have to be with a needle. It can be with like supplementation, where it's like, maybe you're fucking, like, for you, for example, right? Like, you get your blood work done and you're like, yo, I am actually, I am God amongst men. Like, I have a genetic mutation. I would flag in the Olympics. And it's like, great. Then no real intervention needed. But also, like, you have no problem cutting weight. You know exactly, I got to get down to whatever, 73s. Okay. All right. You can do the math. And you can hit right on the point. But it's, if you can't do the math, right, then that's where I think hormones become a useful conversation. It's just, not to say that the majority of people don't, but I hate this idea of like the principle is called the reversion to the mean, that like the average person statistically doesn't exist, right? Like, if I have 10 things and 10 of them are a factor of 10 and 10 are a factor of 0. Or sorry, if I have 10 people and I'm measuring a specific value, 5 could be a factor of 10 and 5 could be a factor of 0. But like, the average person is 5. But it's like, if I give an intervention, it's like, well, it's probably not really going to be that useful for anyone, right? Because I'm going to dose something to a factor of 5, but some only are 10s and some only are 0s. And we revert to the mean, right? We revert to the average. So, in the case of like optimization, I think a really good place to start before going down the road of arbitrarily like fucking up your hormones is like, are your hormones fucked up, or are your habits fucked up? And to what degree are your habits fucking up your hormones? Because that's the one thing I see all the time. Like, hey, just do me a favor. Stick to a fucking caloric restriction. Hit X number of steps a day. Let's try and get your total energy expenditure up. And then those hormone issues start to reverse and compound the reversal without any supplementation or replacement therapy or anything like that, right? Like, and I get where, adherence is going to be a big part of it. But if you have someone who really wants to make a goal with weight change or physique development or something, it's like, all right, I'm going to need 2 weeks, right? I'm going to need 2 weeks for you to like get your steps up, whatever, or get your activity up. Doesn't have to be step. Get your sleep up, dedicate more time to it. And then all of a sudden, those habits precede the change in hormones, right? So you don't need to go ahead. But they're so quick to grab the Tonga, and I don't blame them because I don't think people are pushing the logical precursor to whether or not you need to manipulate your hormones. It's like your habits will dictate your hormones.
Right. I almost think of it as kind of a coincidental finding, is that when you can almost predict this stuff based off of some lifestyle factors. And this was just out of curiosity for me, is I just kind of wanted to see where I was at, because I am getting to that age where male hormones start to drop off. But at the same time, like, training's been going really well. Outside of that, I've been feeling like trash, but that's probably because training's been going really well. So you start to look at all the lifestyle factors, and once you can reel those in, then you can almost predict these things, or once you can at least get some sort of measure on those types of things, like kind of like you mentioned, steps, sleep habits, diet, nutrition habits, exercise habits. All that stuff is going to have an effect on this stuff, or it's, vice versa, is your hormone profile, if that's something that's, out of check, it's going to have an effect on these things. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg type conversation. Is, okay, well, if one of these is out of check, are both of these out of check? So you almost have to equate for you have to equate for the lifestyle stuff before you can really start to equate for the biological stuff, or else you're just adding something in, or you're trying to fix a problem that isn't necessarily the problem. The problem isn't that your hormones are out of check. The problem is that your lifestyle is out of check, and you're not doing the things that are going to promote you having, normal or again, I hate to use this word, but optimal levels at this. You're not optimizing the lifestyle things, and that's something that, I kind of, maybe it's a pride point for me, but I pride myself on being able to set myself up for success, so that I can be, I can accomplish the training goals that I want to. Is that I understand that I need to sleep from this time to this time, and I need to eat this many calories. And outside of that, I'm hitting my 8 to 10,000 steps a day, or whatever it might be. But if those things aren't in check, then there's no way that you can reasonably expect to be set up for success on the biological side of things. That's kind of a reaction to the day-to-day stressors that you're going to have. Is that if, I have unchecked stressors in my life, I can't reasonably expect to biologically not adapt to them. I think that's where a lot of people kind of maybe are short-sighted in their intervention with this stuff, is that they see that things are out of check when they get a blood lab, and maybe they immediately go to the doctor, or they immediately go to the needle, or whatever it might be, to have an intervention before they start to take a look and see how they could reel in the lifestyle factors and make an effect through that.
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold, right? Like, I think to some degree, supplementation helps drive adherence. Like, yeah, I've had people like, oh, should I drink BCAAs? It's like, you're 45 pounds overweight, right? You eat fucking 30 grams of protein a day, and you don't have an ounce of muscle mass to your name. It's like, I don't know if BCAA is your answer. But looking at a big picture, it's like, you can pull up meta-analysis, X, Y, and Z, isoleucine, leucine, valine, whatever. Or you could look at the person and be like, this guy fucking drinks 8 whole sugar Cokes, like normal Cokes a day.
Right. Yeah.
This guy's an asshole. Are you a psychopath? Who the fuck drinks whole sugar Cokes? Like, you're unwell, sir.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, some fucking beast watermelon shit for like 3 of those a day is probably better off. Now, at a certain level, we could talk to Phil Smith and be like, well, actually, that level of intermittent or constant spiking of protein is probably not good for the anabolic effect. Fuck anabolic. We're trying to stop this guy from being type 2. Like, let's worry about not being type 2 first. Right. Then when we'll get him down, 40 pounds, put some weight in his hands, then we'll worry about like the suboptimal effect of drinking BCAAs as it pertains to not allowing for fluctuation, peaks and valleys, and muscle protein synthesis throughout the day, right? So it's like, again, understanding the context of where these things are bad. And that's where like nutrition is so is so exceptionally bad at this. Like nutrition academics are just baby back research bound bitches. It's like, it's just so unbelievable. No one has like a contextual thought that's useful for human beings. Like they're all just like, a recent study shows blah, 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 blah. It's like, do you eat food and talk to people? Like I understand the utility of research from a mechanistic perspective, but like maybe it's our proximity to nutrition where like we know enough about it and the industry. And look, it's difficult to differentiate yourself in any space, but for some reason nutrition goes like particularly academic in their slants. Where like I almost love that about mechanics is like some mechanics people just do because they feel good, and then 30 years later they figure out it was the right thing to do. Where it's like nutrition is almost the opposite. It's like they do stuff that we should have known is bad, look at bad research, and then 30 years later they go, oh, actually smoking and I just saw the screen. Smoking and like full sugar Coke was bad. But there was like a Harvard study about sugar, and it said, it's like, yeah, no, apparently that was all bullshit. It was like, oh, okay. It's like the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's funny. And you use the word suboptimal in there, and the comparison of drinking BCAAs and a full sugar Coke, I think is a really good one, because people don't really have the ability to contextualize these things. Is that how bad is it, or what are the negative effects of drinking 8 full sugar Cokes a day versus what are the negative effects of drinking BCAAs a couple times a day? And if you were to put those on like a bar chart of this will make you die sooner, the Coke is probably going to be a pretty big bar, and the one for BCAAs is probably going to be almost non-existent. Is that in one case, we're talking about maybe stifling or even just slowing progress, and the other one we're talking about, and progress is very generalized in this sense, but drinking those Cokes may be something that's actually going to set you back. So I think that's one of the parts about nutrition, and when we talk about any energy expenditure and hormone optimization, I think these are things that are really hard to contextualize. Is what is the relative benefit versus relative risk of these things, and where does that rank next to one another? Because yes, you can have a nutritional study that says, I don't know, Diet Coke gives you brain cancer. And you can have something that says, oh, sugar is not bad. But understanding where those two ranks and how much that actually matters, one compared to the other, I think is something that's really hard to contextualize. It's just because we have something that someone says, what is the relative risk of that compared to the relative risk of this other thing that someone says? Because I think a lot of those measures, or the way that you can actually quantify these things, is very abstract to a lot of people, myself included. Is I don't necessarily know how to read a study like that and say, okay, this is where this lands versus, one other thing. But I've been around this stuff and, like you said, peripherally involved in it long enough that I can listen to a statement and I can understand, okay, this is something that probably does exist, but where does this rank on my ability to give fucks about this?
I usually make the common denominator of lifetimes, like an arbitrary measure of a lifetime. Like how many lifetimes would you have to live? Like you have two people, like you can respawn and be like, right, how many times would character 1 die and respawn drinking 8 Diet Cokes and dying from some sort of metabolic related disorder that comes with ingesting hundreds of grams of sugar a day? How many times would that character respawn before, 3 BCAA shakes with water a day die of some sort of like, I don't know, glomerular nephritis or some sort of like odd kidney disorder related to breaking down like amino acids or something like that? It's probably in like the hundreds of thousands, right? You'd probably be better off trying to kill someone with water in a race of killing them with Diet Coke. Like, I don't know. The guy just like went hyponatremic because he drank 10 gallons a day. So it's like, that's usually like a common denominator. Like, okay, yes, I understand that given, if we're all fucking Lord of the Rings elves that live forever, who's going to get the fucking frontal cortex tumor or whatever from the Diet Coke? It's like, yeah, the guy's been alive for 700 years. Sure. But it's like, my Uncle Frank is like, well, he died at 60 because he smoked a pack a day and he had like 4 Diet Cokes. It's like, how many Uncle Franks are there to one Gandalf or whatever the fuck,
Yeah, and you can pick these things off of a list, and that's exactly how it go with people. It's like, whether it's in my chiropractic office, people that are trying to rehab some sort of injury, or if it's an athlete, is like, do you smoke? Do you drink and do drugs on the weekend? What's your diet like? What's your sleep like? If you can knock off those 5 questions and hone in those 5 things, then you're probably going to have some pretty good progress with whatever your goal is. But if you're smoking, like, that's probably going to be the thing you need to take care of before you worry about your BCAAs versus anything else. Aside from that, like, alcohol is going to affect your hormone profiles. It's going to affect your sleep, your recovery, your hydration, all of these sorts of things. I'm pretty sure cocaine's not good for any of your adaptations in the gym. I'm not 100% sure on the science with that, but probably
I think cocaine is actually a thermoregulated serotonin reuptake inhibitor. I think that's mechanistically what it is. So it's like probably not good. Yeah, same. It's the ECA stack. That's what the C in ECA. It's not. It was ephedrine. That's the Windsor ECA stack. It's the ephedrine, caffeine, aspirin stack, cocaine, aspirin stack.
That's what it is.
Yeah. So I mean, you bring up an interesting point, right? Like, we're talking primarily around weight loss, but those, and neurotransmitters and hormones are technically different classifications. But it's like, I know plenty of people that just like were pilled out of their heads for most of high school and maybe till to this day. And they're like, yeah, I'm feeling a bit depressed. And it's like, I've heard some stuff recently about the potential links or not links between serotonin and depression. But it's like, there's something in the water there where it's like, probably the serotonin dumps you were going through like 4 nights a week with a goddamn fluffy unicorn mask on, wearing fishnet stockings might have something to do with the fact that you're just like ripping Xannies like they're Skittles at 33 years old. So I think the nice thing about habits, and when we mean habits are, those big ones that you like, nutrition and sleep and activity, and insert anything that would fall into that category, is they not only compound positively towards improving hormone expression in the body, but they also compound on other habits that then compound on positive hormone expression, right? Like, as you're going through that list, like better sleep, you're probably gonna reach for a better, you're not gonna go for that faster sugar fix because you're going to have energy from sleeping, and you don't need quick energy from calories, and then so that improves, and then you have more energy from calories and sleep, so you are more prone to doing activity longer, and then the benefits that come with that actually start to improve the hormones, and that makes you tired so that you can then get better sleep. So there's like a exponential compounding of habits and hormones that we're so quick to try and skip to the base number and make this base number bigger, where it's like the habits are the exponent. And I think a lot of people get that equation backwards. A lot of people look at the habit as the base number. It's like, no. We're to the power of our habits, right? 7 to the power of, 4. It's like, you're going to make a way bigger change if you go 7 to the power of 10 rather than 5 to the power of 4. I think. I hope that math holds up. I didn't do it in my head, but you know what I mean? Moving the exponent.
Yeah.
And the exponent is the habit, rather than everyone thinks moving the hormone is the exponent. It's like, that's not how the equation shakes out.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. And I'm sure you know plenty of people. I know plenty of people that have like they have a drug history, or like they're a recovering addict, and they've maybe found fitness or strength training, or like, it's big in CrossFit too, is that they form habits around getting better at this thing. And like, that's true to some degree, I think, for everyone that's successful at this. Is like, for me, I'll use strength training as an example, is that if my goal is to get stronger, these habits have to stack and be the exponent to this thing, or else I'm not going to see the results in the gym. And that's where you can see positive or negative correlations with this type of stuff, is that, people can find, strength training or fitness, whatever it might be, as a way to, get out of a drug addiction, because the habits that are going to support them getting better at this are going to be very different than the habits that you form when you have a drug addiction. So like you said, sleeping, having a sleep schedule, honing in the diet, nutrition, all of that stuff. So, and then there's the flip side of that too, is that people that seemingly have these performance goals, but they're not aligning their habits with that. And that can be, I think a lot of people, they look in the wrong places, or they try and turn over the wrong rocks when this is the question. And whether that's knowingly or unknowingly, is that, if you're going out and you're partying on the weekend and then you're coming in the gym on Monday and wondering why you can't hit your back squats or whatever it might be, is there's a pretty clear correlation there. We won't call it a causation, but there's a pretty clear correlation between what you did over the last 2-3 days and what's happening today. I think sometimes it's hard for people to see that, or hard for people to be honest enough with themselves to understand that the habits that you do 365 days out of the year are going to have the biggest impact on the things that happen in between those habits. So the things that you do most repetitively, that's going to have an impact on whatever goals lie in between those.
Yeah, I think one thing that you bring up that's always interesting when we have this conversation is like the difference between adaptation and optimization.
Yeah.
And like, look, early stages, because fitness and addiction are really interesting to me, because like we're all addicts to a certain degree, but like
Absolutely.
you can say that kind of in passing until you've met like a real addict, because it's like, dude, it's not real addicts. It's such a wild presentation, man. And like I used to think a type of way about like, I mean, this is young because I got exposure to addicts at like a very young age, but it's like you understand when you understand as best someone can without going through it, just by being exposed to it. It's like when you understand how their lives are when they're addicts, you understand when people use the language of like, oh, I'm in recovery. Like that was like an early question. I'm like, what do you mean you're in recovery? You're like, you're on the drug or you're not. Are you addicted? But because like one of the things that I see with that population as a bit of a sidebar is like, do you know anyone who's gone through like the 12-step program?
Yeah, a few people.
Right. So it's like, I know enough to know what they are, right? So step 11 is self-discipline, but it's like, that's what, and I see fitness as such a dangerous, I don't want to say dangerous because fuck, heroin's dangerous, right? Like black tar heroin is really dangerous.
Yeah.
But I see people get to step 11 in fitness a lot and self-discipline. And then that's where it ends. Like the last step is service. So it's like, it's just interesting whenever that conversation comes up of like building habits, because there's a fragility that comes with step 11, right? Because self-discipline and habits, I think, are two different things. And a lot of times, especially as we're dealing like, if you're dealing with someone with a severe metabolic disorder, you're dealing with someone with a habit, like skewed habits towards improving their metabolism or whatever it is, right? Improving their health. They're an addict to food. They're an addict to whatever soft drink. They can't quit. They're drinking 6 gallons of Coke a day or whatever, or they're alcoholics. But it's like they get to that level, and they get to when they're in fitness, they get to the self-discipline level, and they can't get past it. And that they say that that's self-discipline, but like, okay, you've established these habits. And I see this true of people who try to like optimize habits, and like, I'm not going to shit on morning routines because it's like in vogue to shit on morning routines now. But it's like there's a fragility that comes with hyper optimization, because I think hyper optimization is just habitual behavior that doesn't allow for someone to learn the skills of adaptation, right? Because I look at adaptation and optimization on a spectrum. So I'm always like mindful around building habits around whatever the improvement is, whether it's like, hey, I was addicted to fucking smack and now I really like fitness. It's like, don't miss a class.
Yeah.
Think about it, because you're going to be Ray Charles and a goddamn needle in your arm if you miss the 5 o'clock. So I don't need 7 bottles of Narcan next to your fucking, your skipping rope because you missed a double under. Right. But it's like that's the other side of habits. right? So it's one thing to like go on a supplement and come off it or whatever, and feel a type of way, placebo, this, that, the third. But you can look at that and be like, well, are supplements the answer? No, probably habits. It's like, well, habits aren't the be all end all either, because habits have a dark side when they go too far, when there's too much of a dependent on habits. Right. And we end up, in this veil of self-discipline that's not actually that, but it's really just a hyper optimized fragile state. It's like, that person breaks, man. That person breaks every time, right? They don't know how to adapt and they fucking crumble. Like they go right back to the needle. They go right back to fucking little Debbie or whatever. So it's, I'm not saying that habits are the answer. It's about kind of toggling your approach, understanding like the human side of it, because yeah, supplementation can work for hormones. Sure. Habits can work as well, but they both have like a seedy side to them.
Yeah. I think habits, think of them as an intermediate step towards that self-discipline is probably a healthy way to do it, because that's somewhere I've seen this time and time again is with macro tracking, is that people form habits around macro tracking and they're bringing scales out to, restaurants on a Saturday night, which is like, it's whatever, like do you, and if that's part of the process for you, I think some people have to go through it. But it is that fragility around that, is that people that learn about nutrition through macro tracking, they have this dependency on this system. And when this system isn't there, it causes anxiety around that, and they just don't know what to do and they crumble. So it becomes this dependency on this thing that they're has taught them everything that they know about nutrition, and they don't know outside of that. So I think, maybe a way to approach this is that habits are something that I think are necessary to a degree. And it's part of the process to get you to understand what it takes to get to the goal. And, in this case, maybe the goal is having all zeros on your FitnessPal, or whatever that might be. And that's a good intermediate goal, is to understand how to do that. But I think the thing that you need to do is learn relationships with these things, is that understanding, okay, I was under on my protein after this heavy squat workout and I felt under recovered that day. Or I had my carbs after my workout instead of before, and I felt like I had low energy in the gym that day. Or, I haven't been hitting my fats and I feel like really groggy in the morning. Whatever those correlations or those relationships are, and that's very, focused specifically to macro tracking. But if you can form these habits around whatever the goal is, and then start to learn the correlation between each of those habits and the goal, then that helps you have that self-awareness to now have self-discipline around, okay, I'm going to make this decision and I'm going to accept that if I undereat my protein today, I'm probably going to feel like shit tomorrow, but I just really don't have it in me to fry up this beautiful ribeye that I have in the fridge right now, which is never the case for me. But I think at least understanding the correlations between the habit and the goal, or the habit and the outcome, whether it's good or bad, is what is going to allow people to get to that self-discipline stage. Is that self-discipline doesn't necessarily mean always doing the right thing. It means accepting responsibility for the thing that you do, right? So if I accept the responsibility for the decision that I made and I know what the outcome is going to be, then that's a very informed, disciplined way to make that decision. But I don't think habits are the end all be all. I think habits is a part of the educational process where you can start to pull things from those habits and learn from those habits so that you can make better decisions, or at least accept the decisions that you're making around whatever you're trying to move towards.
Yeah. I mean, I think the self-awareness piece is obviously crucial, right? And it's like, that's something where habits have kind of taken on, can be looked at in a bad light. I look at them in a bad light. I don't have many habits, if I'm being honest, like other than waking up in the morning. Well, that would infer that I sleep at night sometimes. But it's like, the self-awareness thing and how the habit you're performing is mechanistic in the desired outcome of the goal that you have that set that habit in place. It's like, the majority of habits that people adopt, unless the goal is being like an annoying cunt, are probably not reaching towards your goal. Like, your morning ritual of like loose leaf tea and, smudging and grounding or whatever. It's like, okay, like if your goal was to like just piss me off every morning, then like, bravo. I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. But if the goal is some sort of like self-improvement or whatever those things could link to. It's like, that ain't it, man. Like, it's definitely, I mean, who am I to judge? But at the same time, it's like, there has to be an understanding of where it fits in the corpus of the story. Like the latest one, and I almost just feel I'm so annoyed with it that I don't even want to speak on it. But like the ice bath thing, like, can we stop? Like, can we just stop? And it's like, this is like a genuine, like, this isn't like a shallow rant. Like, call your mother. Like, I think of a world where rather than people posting pictures of them getting into ice baths, they called their mother. And I think how much better the world could be if that was the case. And I'm like, well, what do I do? Like, do I rant about this on the podcast? I've literally thought about this. I'm like, do I like post my call log from my phone on my stories to like lead by example, like be the change you want to be in the world? Like, is that what I do? Do I not call my mom? Do I just do lives with my mom? And we just like put it out like for all to display.
That'd be dope.
But it's like, that would be dope. Mom's sick.
Yeah. At least
but it's awesome. Like that awareness piece is so crucial because I mean, it's twofold. Like, if you're a coach, you need to have an awareness of someone else's awareness. That's almost like, because that's really that's what a coach, like, good coaches see something in people that they don't see in themselves. Yes. And it's like, if you want to accept that moniker as a coach, it's like, that's kind of part of the game. Now, there's slopes to that. You're trying to get someone to eat their fucking Wheaties or whatever. You're not trying to back them off a ledge, right? You're not a shrink. But you can understand, like, you can start to see their current habits. Hey, have you noticed on days that you don't sleep well, that you overeat, things like that? Hey, have you noticed on days where you underperform in the gym? Like, you need to start looking at these things that we know mechanistically affect performance or affect recovery, and then inversely affect performance. You need to be able to look at those and point those out, right? Like, I look at coach like a shepherd, right? And you have your sheep you're trying to guide, right? Sometimes it's from the front, sometimes from the middle, sometimes it's from the back, right? Like, you got to figure out where each person is at so that they understand where they are and where they need to go. Because it's like it's such a lazy maneuver to default to just like one intervention or the other, right? Like, for me, one of the ways I would establish habits is like, hey, you drink too many Diet Cokes. Okay, what else should I drink? I can't drink water. It's too bland. All right, yeah. We built a habit from using supplementation, right? And then some people are like, I don't want to take it. Okay, cool. Let's like see what we can do, like improve your sleep. And we just focus on that. And then their sleep improves, and their energy levels improve, and then their nutrition choices are better. This, that, and the third. It's just, I look at everything like visible light, which is like a really weird paradoxical phrase to kind of say out loud. It's like, obviously you look at everything like visible light because it's what you can see. But it's like, we have the electromagnetic spectrum, and between the frequencies that dictate red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, there's what we can see. But then there's like X-rays and gamma rays and so a bunch of stuff we can't see. So we have this like slider window of frequency. And it's like at either end, there's stuff that's probably not great. Like, I wouldn't suggest like looking at a microwave or being surrounded by gamma rays or like, X-raying yourself every day or anything like that. So it's like figuring out, essentially this is just a parallel to like dose dependence of like, look, not like all habits aren't dose dependent, or habits are, they're not just directly correlated. Like, the more habits, the better. Because you're stuck in this 11th step of self-discipline, and you're actually creating an environment of fragility where you can't adapt, right? Like, and I am not as much like this as I used to be, but I train every day, right? I train every day because I know if I don't, my nutrition just goes off the rails. So I have to adjust my training, but that's something that I've like built in. Like, I know where the fragilities are, and I build habits around that. Right. But it's like, in order to optimize, you need to be true optimization by, I think, like the root definition of the word or the desired outcome of optimization has to account for adaptability. Yeah. right? Because I think too often it's like this pristine white coat lab Ivan Drago way of training or eating or being. It's like, look, dog, like you're not in a monastery, you're not a monk. Like that's not feasible. We need to be able to, build systems around this or create awareness around and everyone knows where they'll go. Everyone, like, because it's like, yo, some of my friends, it's right to the fucking nose, just key bumps. Like they're just yayed out of their face. Couldn't give a fuck. Like, you could put a fucking German chocolate cake in front of them. They try and sell it for blow, right? Like they just don't give a fuck, right? So it's like, all right, how do we build this? Like, how do we build around this? Like some of my friends, like, yo, I'm just gonna go to Coachella once a year. I'm just going to rip fucking Colombian smelling salts all weekend, and then that'll be it for the year. It's like, okay, we accept that next week is going to be rough, right? You're going to like tank the shit out of your serotonin, but it's better than like, hey, the Bruins made the playoffs. Let's go. Right? Like, it's like, hey, no, we're going to save the fucking Hollywood rails until we're in Coachella. That's adaptation. That's the winning shit, right? Like when it's fourth and long, when the chips are down, when it's fucking third overtime, teams that can adapt, athletes that can adapt, people that can adapt. That's how we got here through adaptation. Optimization is such a funny, counterintuitive, desired state to be in. It makes no sense to me because it's actually the way people approach becoming optimal or optimizing their health actually leads them to a point of increased states of fragility based off of the lack of recognition of self-awareness, the lack of self-awareness, and then the recognition of how that lack of self-awareness falls victim to the fragility of the structure put forth by the habits that they form.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very nice. I really like the way that you painted that picture because just like you can relate everything back to visible light, I relate everything back to strength training because that's where I'm most comfortable. But true optimization around, we'll say weightlifting, is being able to lift in a different environment than an optimal environment, right? Like training, you can optimize your training where you have, the perfect bar and the perfect weights and the perfect focal point, and it's very quiet and everything's very still, and you have the chalk bucket right where you want it and all this shit. And I feel like strength sports breed OCD around these things, but you can optimize all of those things in training, but then when you get on the platform, it's a different environment and it's relative chaos to your optimal scenario. So really, if we zoom out a little bit and we look at optimal for weightlifting or for strength sports, is you need to be adaptable in the way that you do these things. Is that true? It's kind of like that whole self-discipline or self-awareness or self-actualization, kind of going through that spectrum. Is like true optimization is being able to perform in suboptimal scenarios. That's going to be the most optimal version of any of this shit. So it's maybe kind of in the same way that you have to go through this intermediate step of forming habits to get to this place where you don't depend on those habits, is that you need to understand optimization to a degree, but you also need to understand that optimal is not optimization. Optimal is being able to perform at your highest in a suboptimal environment. And I think
I like that.
that's what a lot of
Optimal is
people
not
don't
optimization. Yeah. I think that's such a key because I think some people are just looking to balance on the head of a needle.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
You're living in a whirlwind, man. There's no point. You'll never hold footing on a base like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's we live comfortable lives, but I think one of the things that's helped me is like, and I don't do it for the very purpose of some sort of physical stoicism, but like, I stay on the road for a myriad of reasons, both conscious and subconscious. I'm sure at this point it's getting out of control, but it's like that reinstates this principle to me that like that allows me to understand the difference between optimal and optimization, like the position versus the orientation, if we want to make it mechanical in nature. Right. So it's just like, it's an act. It's not a destination, right? It's literally like an act of making the best of a situation, but understanding that situations can change, right? And some people just don't like to move, right? They don't like to test that. It's like, well, you're not optimal, man. Like, you're fragile.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a book that I've read a book called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb, and it's kind of that idea. But I think the principle kind of transfers over. He talks about like fragility and things that are like robust. But I mean, we could kind of put optimization or optimal in there. It's like the goal isn't to, I wake up every day at this. It's like, no, sometimes this morning I was up at 3. I had shit on my mind. Yeah. And it's like, all right, well, the optimal is like, because that'll happen. Yeah. Right, that'll happen in your life. I'm really good at when that happens. Like, I get the best work because I know how to adjust it. It's like, all right, well, I'm going to train earlier in the day. I'm going to put my meals this way. I'm going to probably like mess around with my macros a little bit. It's not normal for me. Well, it's a little bit more normal for me, but ideally, like, circadian rhythms are X, Y, Z. Cortisol is probably doing this. Blood sugar is probably doing this. So like, if I'm up at 3 a.m. and I'm training by like 6, I don't know how. Like, I'll adjust my carb intake. It's like, well, I know my blood sugar's high. Why? Because that was probably one of the things that got my fucking anxiety-ridden ass out of bed to begin with. It's like brain dumps cortisol, like 4 times a day. My circadian rhythm is in fucking Bangkok right now, right?
Yeah, for real.
So it's just like, all right, well, blood sugar's and then this is where habits can indicate hormones. Yeah, like, I can look at this and probably get an idea of like, all right, if I prick my finger right now, I'm waking up with a fucking, a blood glucose level, like, I don't know, maybe 6+, right? Because I'm up at 3 a.m. I'm clearly stressed out of my goddamn pits. Like, something's going on. So I adjust. I go, all right, I'm gonna just have protein before I train. I'm not gonna have carbs. I'll go train. I might even not do it after. And then that's optimal.
Right. And I think an important point to take out of all this is that, to a degree, stress can be a performance enhancer. Right? Is that someone that's in a stressful situation, that's going to give them heightened levels of awareness, and they may perform better in that situation to a degree. Now, that's probably more an acute stressor, not a chronic stressor, but something that if you put someone in a scenario that they're unfamiliar with and they have the tools to succeed, then they may be able to dig a little bit deeper and call upon those tools and actually, elicit higher performance than had they not had that stressful scenario. So I think that's an important part to take out of all this too, is that optimal kind of by definition is, in the way that it's commonly used, it's a no stress scenario, right? We're removing stressors to allow you to perform in a very comfortable place. But that's only useful to a degree, especially when, it's game day or whatever the scenario is. In this case, is a stressful scenario that we need to be able to understand how we're going to react to that stressor.
Yeah, I mean, if you put someone in a room, like, I know people who, when they competed in powerlifting, no less, like, they go to a commercial gym and they would have people move from their line of sight in training. It's like, dog, what are you talking about? There's going to be some prick's mom walking through with 2 hot dogs that she just got outside for some jackasses tailgating the fucking powerlifting meet. Like, there are going to be people walking in front of you, and there's going to be more weight on your back when you do it. So you're going to be in all types of new internal and external environments. So if the goal is controlling the environment, it's like, chaos is the environment, man. Like, like, lean into that. Yeah. Because if you can perform under those circumstances, winning is optimal.
Yeah,
that's what's optimal, is winning, being better, being better than competition, or being better than a previous best. Like, that's really what we're after, at least in a performance setting. But all of these things are going to tie together to improve performance if we understand the interconnectivity of, habits versus self-awareness, versus, supplementation or whatever, or hormones, I guess would be a better way to tie it together. Like, all of these things are interconnected. Like, if you bring up the bottom, the ceiling is going to raise up, right? Like, if you bring up the bottom of, like, your worst habit, your best performance will go up, right? Like, if you do less yay, if you just do yay at Coachella, don't do it when the Bruins make the playoffs, your best performance that year will go up. If that's a win, if your your steps, you average an extra 1,000. It's like, oh, okay. Like there's a tensegrity effect to, I think self-awareness, habits, and hormones, that if you start to push these things in a positive direction, and I think that allows for a little bit more leniency, because I think too often these conversations just get reduced down to some dumb, inane post about like motivation or discipline. Like, I can't, dude. I can't with the ice bath shit. Put it right in there.
Fuck.
Like, don't even call your fucking mother.
Yeah.
If you were thinking about this week, if you have a content calendar and you were thinking about this week about, I'm going to post about motivation or discipline, so call your mom. Call your mom and do something. Make that a habit, you stupid fuck. Like, because it's if you can give more portals of entry to improvement, you're going to likely improve more across more people, right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
like just go for. I literally had a dude stop me. I was walking Banksy the other day, and some dude stopped me. He like recognized me from my building. It's like, hey, bro, you look like the type of guy I'd asked for this. I was like, oh, this is what I want, an unsolicited conversation on the sidewalk at 6 a.m. I've had a lot of those this week. And this guy's, I'm down 50 pounds. I was like, no, hey, he's still a heavier dude. He's like, yeah, I hit 3 bills. I was like working in the cannabis business. I'm making a shit ton of bread. I was just fucking eating like an asshole. And he's like, he's on some it's some juice thing. And I was like, oh, not like my juice, like celery or some shit. And I was like, he's like, yeah, I'm like in this calorie deficit or whatever. Like, I'm doing this thing. When do you think I should build? And like, homeboy's he's got a way to go. He's moving, but he's got a way to go. I'm like, all right, real talk. Like, how sustainable is your current? It's like, dude, I don't, like, it doesn't bother me at all. I could do this for, like, all right, we'll do it. Like, get down to a favorable body fat percentage. I understand where you might want to, like, you've lost 50, you think you're in a position to you're not, right? The only thing I would be concerned, the only way I would tell you to build is if a diet break would help you stay on the track of a longer term calorie deficit. So if you're good and you're telling me like, yo, I can stay on the celery bullshit or whatever, and you're obviously like not deficient in some sort of micro or macronutrient or something like that, like not putting your health at risk. But up here, you can be like, yeah, it's fine. Like the hunger, it doesn't bother me at all. I can then stay on that trajectory until it slows down. But it's like then you get to a point, it's like, okay, then build after that. But it's like understanding both sides of it. It's like, look, are you at a health risk for approaching your nutrition and improving your body composition, health, and hormones no? Okay. Are you at a psychological risk of reversing this entire thing? No? Okay, great. But it's like understanding that spectrum has 2 borders to it, right? Like some people just go they go all into one or all into the other. It's like, no. It's going to be dangerous at the end tails, right? It's not sustainable at the end tails. It's like, you can ride the waves towards one side or the other, but it's like, it gets you every fucking time, man. And people don't see. So it's like looking at those 3 things, like, okay, self-awareness, habits, and then hormones. Like those 3 things together allow for very easy access for people to start entering into the chat around improving their overall health and wellness, if you will.
Yeah, and I think along the same vein of that, something to be aware of is that these are typically subtle changes, right? Is that subtle changes are sustainable. When people make these drastic changes, like, all right, this guy hits 3 bills, he's like, I got to lose weight. And honestly, that's probably a pretty drastic change is what he did. And some people, that'll resonate with them. So it's like a really effective conversation, seeing where he's at mentally in the headspace of, is this sustainable? But when people are like, oh man, they get back from, I don't know, their Coke binge from the Bruins making the playoffs, and they're like, oh, I really need to change shit. I'm going to start eating salads every day and drinking my body weight in ounces of water, and I'm going to start working out every day. And they make this huge lifestyle shift. Is cool. That's probably sustainable for like 3 days. And you're going to be like, fuck, this sucks. So a lot of times it's just identifying what are those big rocks. Like homie said, all right, I need to stop smoking weed and eating fucking cupcakes all day. So I'm going to start by doing that. And maybe I'll start drinking some juice too. But making these smaller changes that are going to be sustainable, and then kind of like we said, is starting to stack those habits, not to the point where it's this dose-dependent relationship, is that more habits is good, but more effective habits is good. And they're going to compound and kind of compile in this positive reinforcement way where okay, now we understand the goal, we understand the correlation of these habits to the goal, and then exactly like you're saying, is that's going to help lead them towards that self-discipline, to that self-awareness, where they can now get to a place where they're understanding the correlation or the relationship between the things that they're doing on a day-to-day basis and how that's going to affect their outcome of their goal or the process of them pursuing their goal. And, somewhere in here, there's probably going to be some sort of favorable or positive hormonal response to changing those lifestyle habits. So I think a lot of this comes down to is just finding sustainable things that are repeatable, that you can stomach doing every single day, or at least the majority of the time, and then accepting when those are falling out or when you're not prioritizing those things, the repercussions that are going to come of that. And that's going to be how you start to make these changes.
Yeah, I think creating an environment to foster self-awareness faster is probably the number one goal of a coach, right? Like, it's not going to be like, putting on Ram Dass and having your clients eat a bunch of mushrooms. It's like, all right, like we don't need we don't need Lou Bomb's bodies type self-awareness here, right? Like we don't need like whatever, like Monk Wing Duck or whatever. Yeah, you don't need your clients to self-immolate in the middle of a protest. You just need to put the goddamn Twinkie down, right? Like we don't need some monk shit. But it's like, that's your job. It's like, okay, how do you control the environment to foster and facilitate expedient self-awareness? It's like these processes take time, but they also, it takes some nurturing as well. Like it takes the right environment. It takes the right sort of bedrock to grow these habits that will form into self-awareness. And that's your job. That's what people pay you to do.
And you did make a comment earlier that I do want to highlight, is that you said your job as a coach is to be aware of people's levels of awareness. And I think that's a really valuable statement to understand if you are a coach, is that they're outsourcing that to you. That's essentially what your job is to be aware of the things that they're not aware of that are going to have an impact on their performance. Like something we say in business a lot is what are the unknown unknowns? And that's what they're outsourcing to you. Is this client has come to you as their coach, for you to identify the things that they don't know are affecting their progress, but are affecting their progress. So that's essentially your job, is to identify the unknown unknowns to that client, be aware of their blind spots and awareness. And realistically, if you're a good coach, you'll educate them and make them more self-sufficient on those things. So I think that was a really important statement that you said earlier that we kind of just brushed past, but I wanted to really highlight that and make sure that there's some importance on that to anyone listening to this.
Yeah, do your job.
Yeah,
it's a good takeaway.
Just don't be a piece of shit.
Do that. Yeah, don't just take people's money. All right. Yeah, I think we'll return back. I think we'll probably get Phil on the podcast for this. I mean, Phil always has like a good take on the habitual side of things, but this is an ignoramus's view on this problem, because it is like, we know, like, from one of the reasons we decided to talk about this was because, and I'll show you the stats later if you guys want to see them, the word hormones downloads very well. And it does, right? Because steroids are cool, SARMs are gay, and other supplements that try and fix them are not really the answer. So it's like, it's true. It's true. And we're going to leave that in. We need to start retesting the waters.
Fair.
But it's just like, hormones get too much play, and they need to kind of be put in check. Like, signaling pathways are so sensitive. And you brought that up about like how minor the interventions are. They're minor because hormone signaling by their very definition is minor. That's what makes hormone signaling so efficient. But the nice part about that is that minor signaling pathway, which means like a little bit of hormone can do a lot, right? Like a little bit of norepinephrine can trigger crazy amounts of bodily processes that are autonomic, right? Like a jab you on some like Will Ferrell shit coming out of the trank dart, and I'm alive. Like, it doesn't take much from a hormone, but it also doesn't take much to affect them habitually, right? So it doesn't have to be, right? It doesn't have to be more. It just has to be better. It has to be in the direction of, and it can be across literally like an innumerable number of axes that we would classify as a habit. So rather than reaching for, like, just don't reach for SARMs. I'd rather you guys all take gear. You're going to talk about unknown unknowns. SARMs are dumb. right? Before you grab for the needle, before you grab for like the tongue at Ali, and also like before you go fucking showing your neighbor your ball sack in the morning, like
I'm still doing
understand how to fuck your neighbors. Understand like how to prioritize these things and like what are these habits that we can start to form. What is the environment we can start to put ourselves in with it? I think the end goal being self-awareness, and learning that is going to be like the meta skill that allows you to be able to wield that and have responsibility over the decisions you make and not be fragile.
I have nothing to add. Beautiful.
Dope. Yeah. Sick. RX Radio. Fuck yeah. If you like it, share it with your friends. We're yelling 5 stars. Apple, iTunes, Spotify. We're on Instagram at RX Radio. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. Thanks.